Soul Karma, a short story by Neil M. Thorne. Today was the day Dan would learn who he had once been in a previous life. He approached the occasion with the level of apprehension it deserved, for the outcome would determine his place in this world going forward. The device used to identify a person's past life had been around long enough to become ingrained into society, and, upon becoming an adult, every citizen found out who they were before birth. The standing of that old life, all their achievements and even mistakes, was used as a measure against their own lives now. In a way, it was like a lottery, although one with little hope of winning and an even greater chance of losing out on. Upon reaching the age of 18, his father had learnt that the woman he had been before built up substantial debt that had not been paid off by the time of her death. With that money still owing, responsibility for it fell upon him, and to this day he was still paying it off. His case was fairly typical of what most experienced, and in fact he could have had it much worse. Dan once knew someone a few years ahead of him at school, who, despite having a great education and upbringing, came to learn that they were responsible for a brutal murder. After it was made public, the father of the unfortunate victim sought him out and made him pay for the crime a second time. Despite being an extreme outcome, it was not unheard of. In most cases, however, such people became the pariahs and outcasts of society, never to be welcomed back in. There was always the possibility the outcome could go the other way, and Dan might learn he was once someone important, perhaps even famous, then benefit off their prestige as a consequence. In fact, there was a great deal of anticipation in waiting to find out who was formerly the billionaire mogul who had left his entire fortune to himself in his new life. Still, the decision had not proven popular with his children, and they were expected to contest the decision whenever the day eventually came. The science behind the technology had been groundbreaking in its day, earning its inventors the highest of honours and accolades. However, even they could not have imagined how their creation would one day come to be used. The original hope, having proven the existence of reincarnation and the soul, was that people would use the knowledge for good, to improve upon themselves, and thereby make humanity healthier going forward into the next life. Perhaps it was naive to have believed such an outcome, but Dan appreciated the idea of it. Maybe the world they envisioned might one day be possible, but for now the time had come to learn who he had once been. The procedure itself was relatively simple and pain-free, just a scan and then a small wait for the results. When finally coming back, however, it was not what he expected, and wondered if there had been a mistake. There could be no doubt about it, though. He was no one before. This was his first life. As surprising as it was, and though no one was able to explain why, new souls occasionally entered the world. What this meant for him, in a society that judged every person upon a life lived before they were born, he did not know, and was left feeling lost and out of place. No one could offer him an answer, and so he found it more daunting than any of the other possibilities imagined so far. For a long time Dan was lost in his own limbo, until, after much contemplation, he came to realize it was instead an opportunity. He had a clean slate, meaning there were no limitations or even restrictions being placed upon his life. He could do with it exactly as he pleased, although this did not mean living without consequence, as any choice made in this life would affect him in the next. The path ahead may not be the easiest, but Dan decided to make the best of what lay before him, and really, what better way could there be of changing the world? It would not have an immediate effect, but at least it might clear the way for whoever followed in his footsteps. Thank you for listening, and if you have enjoyed this story, please feel free to like, comment, and follow for more.